Hello and thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel, Behind the Lyrics. In this episode, something just a little bit different. Instead of behind the lyrics, it's going to be behind how the bands got their names. There's so many great bands out there with cool names, and it's interesting to learn how some of the bands got their names. I'm going to start in the 1970s, and there's so many bands from the 1970s, I'm going to break this down into 2 episodes, this being the first one, the second one to follow shortly, so keep an eye out for it. Now, I'm going in alphabetical order, and the first band up is AC/DC. It's very simple. Agnes and Malcolm Young developed the name of the band after their sister Margaret saw AC/DC, meaning the device could be powered by either alternating or direct current, on an electric sewing machine, and they said, why not AC/DC? Next up is Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. They formed the band Aerosmith. Drummer Joey Kramer has said he and his girlfriend were listening to the Harry Nilsson song Aerial Ballet when the couple began toying with cool band names that had Aero in them. They came up with Aeromind, Aerostar, Aero this, Aero that, and finally, Aerosmith. He liked how Aerosmith sounded, but the band he was in at the time didn't, so it was shelved until Kramer joined Joe Perry and Steven Tyler's group. It's been said the name derived from the Sinclair Lewis novel Aerosmith, but the band members say that is not true. Next up, the band Alice Cooper, or is Alice Cooper just one person? Well, Alice Cooper was originally a band name. The Alice Cooper Band had been through a couple of names, including the Earwigs and the Spiders, before settling on the name Nas. But they found out that band name had already been taken by Todd Rundgren. Vince Fournier, Alice Cooper's real name, said, "I just kind of said Alice Cooper. It just came out of my mouth. That was it." The name conjured up an image of a little girl with a lollipop in one hand and a butcher's knife in the other. Lizzie Borden, Alice Cooper. They had a similar ring. Vince Fournier legally changed his name to Alice Cooper before the band's first album. Next up, Bad Company. The English supergroup was formed in London in 1973. Founding member Paul Rogers says the idea for the band came from a book of Victorian morals that showed a picture of an innocent child looking up at an unsavory character leaning against a lamppost. The caption read, "Beware of bad company." Let's keep rocking on with Black Sabbath. The original name of the band was, believe it or not, Polka Tuck Blues Band. They then changed to the Earth Blues Company, then later shortened to Earth. Then that name was discarded because another band was already using it. Now there was a theater across the street from the band's rehearsal space that was showing the 1963 horror film Black Sabbath, which starred Boris Karloff. Band members Butler and Ozzy Osbourne wrote a song titled Black Sabbath, inspired by the horror genre, and they chose Black Sabbath as the name of the band. From black to blue, let's take a look at Blue Oyster Cult. These pioneering hard rockers started out as Soft White Underbelly. That name was derived from a phrase used by Winston Churchill in describing Italy during World War II. They got their new name from music journalist Sandy Pearlman, an early manager and producer of the band. Blue Oyster Cult was mentioned in a series of poems by Pearlman in reference to a secretive group of aliens from outer space that influenced Earth's fate. The Boomtown Rats. The band was originally called the Nightlife Thugs. But frontman Bob Geldof changed the name after returning to Ireland in 1975. Boomtown Rats was the name of the gang Woody Guthrie hung around with as a kid. Moving on to one of the loudest bands I've ever heard, Cheap Trick. In 1973, members of the band attended a Slade concert when bassist Tom Peterson commented that Slade used every cheap trick in the book as part of their act. The band wanted a name that was fun but not too pretentious, so they chose Cheap Trick. Next up is a big band with a lot of members, Chicago. In 1968, the band moved to Los Angeles and signed with Columbia Records. At the time, the band was not named Chicago, it was named Big Thing. Jimmy Guercio, who would eventually become Chicago's producer, changed the name to Chicago Transit Authority in honor of the bus line he used to take to school. It was later shortened to Chicago because the Chicago Transit Authority threatened to sue the band. Now let's take a look at the band Lionel Richie was in, Commodores. The Commodores were formed when members of two bands joined together. The members of the bands were freshmen at Tuskegee University in Alabama. When deciding on a name for the newly formed group, trumpet player William King picked up a dictionary, opened it, thumbed through the pages, and picked the word Commodores. King said they lucked out as the band could have been named the Commodes. Just a note, you may refer to them as the Commodores, but band members always insisted they be referred to as just Commodores. Here's a band that was the #1 band in the world at one time. CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. The original name of the band was the Blue Velvets. Then it was changed to the Gollywogs. The Gollywogs, I mean, are you kidding me? What a name. It quickly changed. How did the new name originate? The band took the name from, firstly, John Fogerty's friend Creedence Newball. Secondly, Clearwater from a TV commercial for Olympia Beer. And finally, Revival. The band had been playing together for nearly 10 years under other band names and were finally able to try to make it to the big time. It was a revival of sorts when things finally came together for the guys in the band. Next up, Mark Knopfler and his band, Dire Straits. It's pretty straightforward how the band got its name. Brothers David and Mark Knopfler, along with friends John Isley and Pick Withers, formed the band, choosing a name that was derived from the band's financial situation. They had no money for nothing. They were in dire straits. A band you've just gotta love, the Doobie Brothers. It's very simple. Before they became a 70s sensation, the Doobies were a bunch of hippies living together in a house in Northern California. When they were in search of a name for their band, one of their roommates, Keith Dino Rosin, who was not in the band, suggested the name after the band would often say, "Let's smoke a doobie," whenever someone wanted to smoke a joint. The band initially thought the name was silly, but used it for their first few shows anyway. They planned to change the name later, but they simply never did. One of my favorite bands from the 70s, the Eagles. Now there's a little controversy as to how the Eagles got their name. Suggestion number 1 is when during a group outing in the Mojave Desert and high on peyote and tequila, founding member Bernie Leadon suggested the name. Leadon recalled reading about the Hopi Indians' reverence for the eagle. Suggestion number 2, J.D. Souther, who co-wrote many of the band's most famous songs, adds more nuance to the story as he claims Glenn Frey randomly shouted out Eagles as a suggestion for the band's moniker when they saw an eagle flying above them. Next up, Jeff Lynne and ELO, Electric Light Orchestra. When Jeff Lynne of the band Idle Race and Roy Wood, formerly of The Move, teamed up to form an orchestral pop and rock outfit in the early 70s, they chose their name as a pun on the British phenomenon of light orchestras, groups that would play easy listening music rather than classical compositions. They added the word electric because of their electric rock instruments, thus ELO. Fleetwood Mac, it doesn't get much easier than this. Fleetwood from the last name of drummer Mick Fleetwood, and Mac from the last name of John McVie, the bass player, sometimes referred to as Mac. Foghat. On the eve of releasing their first album, the band was still struggling to come up with a name. Brandywine Track and Hooch were considered before settling on the name Foghat. Guitarist Dave Peverett reportedly made up the meaningless word while playing Scrabble with his brother John when he was a child. Peverett used the word to create an imaginary childhood playmate named Junior Foghat, who became an alter ego of the musician. Let's move on to Foreigner. The original name of the band was Trigger, but it was found out that name was already being used. So Mick Jones came up with the name Foreigner. The name was inspired by the fact that at least 3 of them would always be foreigners, no matter where they went. That's because their original lineup included a trio of Brits, that's Jones, Ian MacDonald, and Dennis Elliott, as well as 3 Americans, Lou Gramm, Al Greenwood, and Ed Gagliardi. Genesis. The prog rock pioneers got their name from their first manager, John King. At one time, the band had the name Garden Wall, and they had also considered calling the band Gabriel's Angels in reference to founding frontman Peter Gabriel. Instead, King came up with Genesis to indicate the beginning of his production career. Next up, Golden Earring. The original name of the band was the Tornadoes until the band realized there was another successful band already named the Tornadoes. So the Golden Earrings took their name from an instrumental called Golden Earrings by the Hunters, a British group for whom they often opened. Now they dropped the S in Earrings, streamlined the name to Golden Earring, and had hit songs with Radar Love and Twilight Zone. Grand Funk Railroad, another easy one. The American band named their band after the Grand Trunk Western Railroad that ran through their hometown of Flint, Michigan. Heart. In the early 1970s, Ann Wilson joined an established band named White Heart. When she joined, the band changed its name to Hocus Pocus. Well, the band broke up, but some of the members later got together and formed a new band. They simply called it Heart. Ann's sister Nancy joined the band in 1974. Iron Maiden. The band was formed on Christmas Day in 1975 by bassist Steve Harris. He had been in a band by the name of Smiler. Harris attributes the band's name to a film adaptation of The Man in the Iron Mask from the novel by Alexander Dumas. The title reminded him of the Iron Maiden, a notorious torture device from the Dark Ages. Jethro Tull. It's pretty interesting that the band Jethro Tull changed its name time and time again. The reason was they would play in a club, they wouldn't be received very well, so they had to change their name in order to get booked again. There was a real person named Jethro Tull. He was an 18th century Englishman who, as a pioneer of agriculture technology, invented the seed drill. Journey. The original members of the band Journey came together in San Francisco in 1973. The original name of the band was the Golden Gate Rhythm Section. But band members decided to change their name, and they held a radio contest to let listeners submit names. The winner would get tickets to their shows for a lifetime. However, the contest produced disappointing results, and the suggestions were disregarded. Luckily for the group, a roadie named John Villanueva suggested the name Journey, which was ultimately agreed upon by all band members. So there you have it, the first episode of how bands from the 1970s got their names. There were so many of them. I mean, the 1970s was the best decade for rock and roll music. And I'm so glad I grew up in that era. Be sure to check out episode number 2, as I have about 25 more bands to talk about from the 1970s. I hope you found this video fun and informative. If you did, I hope you take the time to like it, subscribe to my channel, and click the notification bell so you'll be notified when I post a new video. That's it for this episode. As always, keep listening to the music and rock on.